So Tom, thanks so much for joining. You head up the winemaking for Tamar Ridge, Devil's Corner, and Pirie. But firstly, how did you get into making wine?
I was a slow starter actually. So yeah, I actually travelled around England and had a job on the Thames where I was introduced to wines. They had an amazing cellar in this restaurant we used to taste a lot. And then when I went back to New Zealand, I was about 26 when I first started training and first started working in wineries, which is about 20 years ago now.
Yeah, and therefore, why not stay in New Zealand? What was it that lured you over to Tassie?
I've done a number of vintages overseas in California, Italy, in France, for instance, and Australia. And I suppose the industry in Australia is bigger, so the opportunity is more for winemaking positions. So I actually went to South Australia first, and then I had a contact to get into Tasmania. And it made a lot of sense to me with the varieties that Tasmania has and my background in New Zealand. And things sort of moved from there in Tasmania.
Cool. And how would you typify Tasmania on the sort of the domestic market in Australia and then on the world stage? What role do you think Tasmania plays in both those fields?
It's very, I suppose it's, how do you say, top end. It's 1% of Australians wine is Tasmanian. It's a very small part of the game. And we're very distinctly cool climate. We're really getting a name for ourselves across those varietals. I suppose sparkling's been singing for a number of years, but Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are really, really starting to push themselves forward in the UK and around the world in tastings that people do it, but also obviously in the mainland as well. And I think we can just do it to such a quality that is quite unique, and to have sort of the mainland of Australia, this massive market on the doorstep. So Tasmania in itself is becoming quite a thing in around Australia now.
Yeah, so in the last few years, as I say, there's been a big move to some of the bigger players in the industry sourcing fruit from Tasmania for their top wines. Devil's Corner, Tamar Ridge has quite a big provenance, quite a big history within the island, and so plays a very important role. It's is that still very much the case that people are looking to you for guidance as to how to farm and how to source fruit and where the best regions are?
Um, I'm not sure if they're looking to us. I think Tamar Ridge has been around for 20 odd years now. So it has a bit of a reputation in the market for top end Pinot Noir, or top end on whatever it does. Devil's Corner is slightly more of a commercial brand. So it's certainly made it's seen a lot more around. So it's talking Tasmania to a lot more people on the mainland, and there's a lot of recognition of Tasmania through the Devil's Corner brand.
Sure.
And I think the success of both those brands has certainly guided a lot of larger companies probably to come in. But I think in general, there's a lot more small guys doing great things as well around us. And they're sort of talking Tasmania out there in their little unique little regions. And Tasmania, though being quite small, has these unique regions amongst it.
Yeah, maybe I should have said it's the Devil's Corner, because of its exposure in the market, has driven some fantastic focus towards Tasmania from the consumer point of view.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I mean, Devil's Corner's got some incredible awards in the last few years as well. So, and that gives you a chance to talk about it. And it's just an amazing, I mean, it's hard to talk with you guys who are probably locked up right now, but it is a stunning sight, riding down to the ocean, and there's a cellar door there now. And every time, I mean, I've been here 10 years, and every time I go there, it blows me away with how beautiful it is.
So separating the two, Tamar, I think that's the Tamar in the background, beautiful view of the Tamar Valley, in the north of Tasmania, and then Devil's Corner from the east. Not huge amount of distance in terms of Australian distances, but what really separates the two in terms of the styles of fruit that you're bringing off the vineyards there?
Yeah, I took this photo actually. It's about 5 minutes from the Caina Vineyard, which is where Tamar Ridge is from, on the Tamar River. And the Tamar Valley is obviously, it's in the north of Tasmania. So it's about 50 k's north of Launceston, which is the second biggest city in Tasmania. And its biggest focus is the Bass Strait above it. So the ocean, it's very close. It's about 50 k's from the ocean, and the river running down to the east. And that moderates the temperature there in the Tamar. About 2 hours drive from there, we get to the east coast of Tasmania, and that's where Devil's Corner is located. And they're even closer to the ocean. So they're right almost their feet of some of the vine sits in Malting Lagoon. And they've got the Tasman Sea there, and the weather all comes from the west. So basically, whenever there's westerlies, all the rain is dropped on the western tiers. And so the east coast can be very dry, whereas the Tamar Valley's got a lot more higher average rainfall, and that changes the exposure. It's a little bit warmer and a little bit earlier on the east coast. And that sets a definite change in the way the wines evolve and the grapes evolve and the style that we get from those.
And so, and from the year you joined, 2010, have you got any vintage that really sticks in your mind, whether it be good or bad, but one that perhaps typifies Tasmania for the difficulties or prowess that the fruit can provide?
I mean, we've had a really good run of vintages recently. 2015 certainly stands out as probably the best vintage I can remember on the east coast of Tasmania. From just the concentration in the fruit, we had very little. And I mean, I suppose the challenge of making wine in a cool climate like we are here is the disease pressure and the length of the season. It not only gives us great grapes, great aromas and flavors, but it also puts a lot of pressure on those grapes to actually get them ripe and get them make great wine. But in the Tamar Valley, it's probably 2017 is probably the best vintage. It's just one of the few years we had very little disease pressure and basically could pick to make the best wines we possibly could. 2011 was the worst vintage across both vintages. Across both vineyards, it was a disaster on the east coast. When I said everything usually comes from the west, it came from the east in 2011, and we got a lot of rain, and it put a lot of pressure on the vineyard.
Horrible. It's I think back then you were also making a couple of Bordeaux varieties, or the intention was to make a couple of Bordeaux varieties. Is the move now strictly on the Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling? How's that? How the planting's looking currently?
Yeah, I mean, 50% of what we do is table Pinot Noir, which is a little bit unusual for Tasmania. Is a lot of the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay goes to sparkling, and we obviously make quite a bit of sparkling as well. But our real passion is those Pinot Noirs. We did have some Cabernet and some Merlot at both sites, and we've pulled those back out. We pulled those out a number of years ago, actually. We would only get one good vintage in 3, so it didn't make a lot of sense to really get those. But we are, interestingly enough, we've just planted some Shiraz or some Syrah, as we're going to call it, on the east coast, which is a little bit warmer. And so we've planted about 2 hectares of Syrah there. And we bought some Syrah this year. So I've got 4 barrels, and we're looking at making a Pinot Noir Syrah wine, which is quite fashionable at the moment, actually, but we think it's pretty good. So we're probably going to release that at our Devil's Corner cellar door.
Nice. And if you weren't working in Tasmania, are there any great varieties that you'd like to really get your hands on and play with? I think often asking this question to most winemakers move to Pinot Noir and Riesling. But perhaps you go the other way, or are you happy with Pinot Noir and Riesling like most winemakers would love to work with?
Yeah, I always feel incredibly privileged to be making wines in Tasmania. I think it's one of the most exciting places, and I think we've got the potential to be making some of the greatest wines in the world. But I enjoy Grenache, maybe from the McLaren Vale, or Syrah from the Hunter Valley, if we're just going to go Australia based. And so it's exciting to plant Syrah here to see how it's going in our own Tasmanian backyard. But to be honest, I enjoy drinking them, but I don't think too much about making them. I have enough stuff going on in my head with all the wines I have to make myself. Yeah.
So would you say Tasmania, its biggest strengths lie in Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and let's touch a little bit on sparkling. So how much how important is the sparkling to Tamar Ridge and the Pirie name as well? Is that
well, sparkling is incredibly important for Tasmania in general. It's what's probably set our benchmark for the last 10 to 15 years on the world stage. And Pirie is a big brand for us that, it's probably, I think it's the most successful wine show wine in the country, to be honest, the Pirie Sparkling, whether it's NV or vintage, and they're just cracking wines, to be honest. And we talk about vintages, but in Tasmania, with the quality of sparkling grapes that we get here every year is a vintage year. But I mean, I suppose I'm incredibly excited about the table wines that Pinot Noirs that we're producing. I think I make 8 different Pinots now down here, and table Chardonnay. I think we've got. It seems a bit, I don't know what the word is, selfish, but I think we can. People sometimes say, "Oh, we can do Chardonnay and you can do Pinot," and I'm like, "Well, I think we can do Chardonnay and we can do Pinot and we can do Riesling." So I think we can do amazing things across a number of varieties in Tasmania.
Very nice. And obviously the culinary. I think when I came over to Tasmania in 2011, we met. When the first time I went over, people were saying, "Oh, why are you going to Tasmania? It's a bit backward and nowhere." And then when I revisited in like 2016, going through those same places in South Australia, people then said, "You're going to Tasmania. I'm incredibly jealous. It's got such a fantastic reputation." And I think MoMA's perhaps had something to do with that. But I think the focus on Tasmanian culinary extraordinary culinary sourcing has had something to do with that. Is there have you seen that over the last 10 years there's been this big influx and more interest in people coming to Tasmania for fresh produce and therefore the wine as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's become a real food and wine hub. I'm similar to you. When I came over, if you mention Tasmania, everywhere in Australia, they just go, "Why would you go to that cold place?"
Exactly.
And it's kind of like, and you go, "Well, because I'm sweating my ass off here, so I'd prefer to go down there." But now, it's a really exciting place for people to go. I mean, I think people are getting to the stage now, because it has been for quite a number of years now. They fly into Hobart, they explore the East Coast, and we get a lot of visitors at Devil's Corner there. And now they're sort of coming back to their second and third trips, and they're getting into Launceston. Launceston's the real place where everything's growing, the farms are, and things like that. So there's a lot of good places to eat around Launceston as well, which is the Tamar Valley. And there's cider, there's apple trees. So agriculture is a big thing, probably similar to England in that respect. It's an incredibly exciting place to be.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can picture being the perfect Tasmanian wine food matching?
Oh, it's a tough question, isn't it? I mean, the obvious one always to go to with Pinot Noir is roast duck, but that's a bit of a cliche. I always love the slow-cooked roast lamb. And if you can get an older Pinot type thing to go with that, or just go away and just drink something from the Yarra Yering out of the something like that, a bit of a richer style Bordeaux blend.
Yeah, nice. And so before we leave, what would be your desert island wine? Would it be something from Tasmania, or would you have to look further afield?
Oh, I always find this a really tough question, because there's so many wines.
But you knew it's going to come. So.
Yeah, that's right. I did say that I suppose Chardonnay and Chablis is. I've been drinking some Christian Moreau Chablis lately, and I found them absolutely stunning. And that sort of suited that desert island sort of thing. So if right now, that's the wine I would choose, but it might change tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. Been a real pleasure chatting.
No worries, Elliot. Thanks for the call.
Cheers. Thank you.